Om yo brahmanan vidadati purvam, yo vai vedamscha prahinohi tasmai, tanhadeva atmaburi prakarsha, mumukshurvai sharnamaham prapadje. Om shantihi, shantihi, shantihi. That one indivisible, formless presence, out of which the Trinity and the avatars all emerged at the beginning of a cosmic cycle. And who vouchsafed the Vedas to Lord Brahma, who is an eternal bridge to immortality, who is partless, formless, actionless, and divine, who resembles fire that has consumed all its fuel. I place my mind and go for refuge to that Supreme Brahman, whose light turns the attention of mankind to the Atman, the indivisible self within. May that Brahman protect us, may it sustain us, may it illumine our thinking process. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings, and may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om, peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat. We welcome you here to SRV Loka as we begin a deep dive into the third class of our series called Obsessed Mind, Ordinary Mind, and Original Mind. And I'm sure that those come in order, and you can put them in the best order, that you want to steer clear of that obsessed mind. But I would say that most people in the physical world are rather obsessed with matter, whether they know it or not. But there is an option to be obsessed with God realization, or enlightenment, or formlessness, or dharma, or the higher qualities of life, or compassion, or service of man, of God and mankind. All of these are, of course, options for those who take to spiritual life. And it would be an easier time getting there if you were a part of that category called ordinary mind, which is just everyday mind, pursuing various things, going to work, and raising children, making one's livelihood, those things. Everyone is doing that. So at that level, consciousness comes down to that level of ordinariness or convention or mundanity or superficiality, or perhaps those things really interest the mind. And that's then called aparavidya, the lower knowledge, which India also mentions as being a valid pursuit for the human being here in the embodied condition. The embodied condition, of course, would not be possible without this separate ego, this sense of I-ness. So we try and ripen that sense of I-ness towards a wider perspective and lean more towards universal mind, like the great master Sri Ramakrishna possessed. So that's a mind that's maybe leaning more towards original mind, or possibly even transcendent mind, or no mind, sometimes they call that. When you look at souls like that, then you see them coming in and out of lower states of consciousness, if they even frequent them all the time. And they will, whereas many people will vacate the body and senses in their deep sleep state, even in their dream state, they'll leave behind the five senses and the physical body and then I'll create a dream body with dream senses. But in deep sleep, all that goes away. So it's been one of the facets of consciousness, the M of Om, where everything dissolves. And self, if it's conscious, or if it practices awareness, has a chance to see itself for maybe the first time in many lifetimes, if not in that one given lifetime. And that's an aha moment. That's a epiphany. They have even English words for that, but that's a kind of samadhi in Sanskrit. And then one begins to see, as we were talking about at satsang yesterday, that there's a witness to the ego and to the mind's thoughts and to the intellect's gathering of knowledge. So that aparavidya comes along and takes people up and takes people in, particularly at the intellectual level. So the seers began to look beyond the intellectual frame of reference. I'm quoting my teacher, Swami Sheshanandaji Maharaj, peace and bliss be upon him, because when he had given these Vedanta teachings for years at the Vedanta Society in Portland and other centers that he was visiting and living at prior to that, he would use that phrase, you must get beyond the intellectual frame of reference, because he saw the scientists and others, the studious part of Americans, and their consciousness was focused upon that. It still seems to him then and to others to be rather ordinary, because you're looking at changing matter and thinking there's going to be some new secret come out of that. And when it does, then you're going to use that secret in an ordinary sense of the term, like for creating weapons or for new modern conveniences, new ideas, inventions, and so forth, which kind of follows the run of that word sankalpa and vikalpa in Sanskrit, where the mind is always looking to project itself, its thoughts out upon matter. And then that potential problem of becoming obsessed with them occurs. We'll look at that today a little bit. Maybe I'll show you the sevenfold road to rumination chart, which is always a lot of fun to look at. Krishna looks at that in the Gita and talks about it as how the soul, the mind soul, this is, soul with a small s, could be involved in ordinary everyday thoughts and actions and all of a sudden become obsessed with some given thing. Maybe out of nowhere, or maybe was born that way or inherited that from parental upbringing. Oh, my dad was very much into this and that sport, or very much into this and that action, and I acquired that taste, and now I'm that way. And so there's a kind of preference or a habit that could turn into an obsession. So in this class series, we've been looking towards how to keep the mind free and buoyant. Like the first chart I want to show you, that Sri Ramakrishna is saying that if the mind is like a hot air balloon, then it floats freely. But it's not going to be able to do that until it can cut off some of the sandbags that are weighing it down. So we'll look at a few of those weights that are keeping people from having this free and natural and original kind of mind visit them. Now remember, and I'm repeating it for the third time, is that we're not assigning people to these three states of mind as much as we are pointing out that the mind visits all three of them. The mind of most beings could be tamasic and obsessed with dark things, depression and so forth, one day or 1 week. And of course, meditation will show that up if you practice it. And then the next week it can be feeling very active and spinning its wheels, sometimes going nowhere when it does that. That's the description of rajas. But it still gets some satisfaction out of its forward momentum of the body-mind mechanism as it launches itself into the workplace. It's playing among the fields of the Lord, but that play can become very sattvic and balanced. Nice Sanskrit word there. And all of a sudden that same mind that was depressed or active can become very balanced for a period. So that almost is a threefold moniker for being able to say obsessed, ordinary, and original. If you could keep sattva, then keep that balanced mind, then the original mind would tend to dawn on you more and more, and you would have less and less commerce or contact with these other two gunas, they're called in Sanskrit, or with any kind of darkness or any kind of frenetic activity that is quite often counterproductive to human life. So it's good then to take a deep look at the mind to find out what we need to cut off from it with our spiritual practice of meditation, study, devotions, and service, the four yogas, so that it can float naturally. It can be buoyant, as Sri Ramakrishna said. So with a short preamble then, because it's the last class and we want to make some headway towards these, describing these three kinds of mind, let's look at that chart that has to do with the buoyant mind. I have two versions of it. I think I called up the blue one this time. There's also an orange background one that we have. But basically you can see Sri Ramakrishna right at the beginning of the chart, in the top quote, I'll read it to you. Rainwater seeks the lowest place to settle. Likewise, the ordinary human mind becomes heavy and dwells on lust and greed all the time. It is like the case of a hot air balloon weighed down by sandbags so that it cannot soar. Thus the wise soul frees itself from the sandbags of worldliness with the sharp knife of spiritual self-effort and rises to inspiring heights directly and effortlessly. This is, of course, follows the tact of Advaita Vedanta sadhana, where instead of doing work that happens to be self-motivated or selfishly motivated, one begins to think of accomplishing the thing even prior, before one undertakes it. Like in meditation, I'm going to have a very beautiful meditation tomorrow morning, so you set yourself up for it, you sit, you remember that declaration you made, and that day happens to be all set up. In the same way, you can do that with each event of life or any area of study or meditation that you undertake, any level of concentration that you undertake. So Sri Ramakrishna is talking about that when he says, with spiritual self-effort, the mind can rise to inspiring heights directly and effortlessly. That's something to keep in mind in this quote. However, if it's not such an easy task as that, if one doesn't yet have that sharp knife of spiritual self-effort, then that's advised by the seers and the sages and the rishis of India. Sadhana, it's called. And you're well aware of that word if you've been taking in SRV classes for some 30 years now. We always talk about the distinction between those who do sadhana or have a daily practice and those who don't, and how much tarnish and rust is removed from the mind-body mechanism and the energy called prana if this spiritual practice is kept up every day, despite of the gunas as they change. As one can feel a background tamas or darkness on a particular day, you could be picking it up from a collective culture. You could be picking it up from the ancestors. You could be picking it up from the Ukraine, things that are happening on Earth and everything. And it's not necessarily your tamas, your darkness. So then you put that to the background and you do your practice and you keep with the Dharma and with the elevating thoughts. And it could be that in that moment of darkness, the Divine Mother Wisdom that you're courting and that you're concentrating on reveals to you a sandbag that doesn't need to be there and maybe has been there unbeknownst to you for a long time. So let's look straight at that. You can see the hot air balloon itself. It's divided into higher mind and lower mind. And then you can see in yogic fashion, these, on either side of the chart, what's called aklista vrittis, or thoughts, and klista vrittis. People have, since Patanjali put out the 8-limb yoga system in maybe 100 or 200 years after Jesus, and some 700 years after Lord Buddha, Patanjali was able to classify this into a mind yoga, and which is, of course, far superior and far more beneficial to a person than a mere physical yoga. So he began to emphasize these aklista and klista thoughts that were dictating people's lives. The thought is father to the deed is an expression that comes out. It's a Western expression. So even people in the West have picked up on this idea that positive thoughts, if one could adhere to them, or as I was just saying, if one could stay with sattva, then that's going to make a big impression on life. But people don't know that because they don't do a practice that seizes them and keeps them in mind over an elongated period of time. So a penultimate goal, we used to say in SRV, is that you think, I'm going to keep my mind sattvic, balanced and free of negativities for as long as I possibly can. It's like when you're a kid in a swimming pool. I'm going to hold my breath for as long as I can now, so your friend times you and you work up so you can hold your breath longer and longer and stay underwater more. That's sort of the idea with meditation and with the mind's thinking process. If you can take a vow that my day is going to be full of aklista vrittis, positive, non-threatening thoughts to myself and to all others, then you're not only helping yourself, but you're adding into the positive balance of the world, and therefore taking away from the negative side of things. So there on the aklista side, by the way, Sanskrit, klista means pain-bearing. So pain-bearing obstacles are there for the practitioner when they begin to examine the ground of their mind. What's my mind like today? Sri Ramakrishna said it's like a wet road today. The path is wet. It means that snow won't collect on it. It just melts. So anything good I put into it won't adhere to my mind because it's got the wetness of worldliness on it. So if I can dry my path out, dry my mind out of klista vrittis, then the snow will turn into huge banks, and I'll have a huge abundance of collective positive thoughts, white thoughts, as it were, instead of this mud that accumulates on a wet road when it snows. So using that as an analogy, then a person leans far then to that side of the aklista, the freedom from pain-bearing thoughts. You see the red flags on the right-hand side, though. Those were a perfect opportunity in this image to put the 6 passions there: lust, anger, greed, delusion, vanity, jealousy. And you could see there emanating out of the cloud the force of some scars. Some scars are impressions from past lifetimes that are causing people to do things that they necessarily don't want to do, or are driving them towards beneficial things that they never thought it was possible to do for them. So some scars are of mixed negative and positive kinds. It's accumulated residue in the mind, which is a kind of memory of actions done in previous lifetimes. So Western psychology, they don't go there. Jung, Freud, and so forth didn't take a very deep look at that. But in India, this has been the way it has been all along, is that a person thinks, acts, and goes about everyday life with this wind of karma. You could see it on the other side there, the winds of karma. And then also under the force of these clouds of samskara, these residues or remembrance of what I did before. Sometimes those hound you as negative things that come up in your life, and you say, why me? And then instead of saying, who am I, you say, why me? And so that causes the mind to deviate from this possibility of accumulating aklishtha vrittis until such a time when sattva comes and remains, stays there, like banks of beautiful snow. So you see these 6 passions there. I could have also put the 8 fetters. I could have put the 9 antarayas. I could have put the 5 kleshas. There's a whole bunch of sets of negativities that are termed klishta in Sanskrit that cause negative thought. So is it my fault? Yes and no. And it's like when the parents asked Jesus about their son, why was he born blind? Is it the parents' fault, or is it God that made that happen? And Jesus said, neither. Obviously, it's the soul's fault, but not in that lifetime it wasn't. So you have to think deeper than just cause and effect in one lifetime. You're going to have to go back to find out what the soul, that is the mind soul, came in with when it was born into the fresh body. And that's going to take watching the young mind over time. We've done that to a certain extent in early American life, and with trying to guard it with morals and ethics. But we haven't been all that aware of a kind of practice that alleviates negative aklishtha vrittis in the mind. We just see them rise and then we punish them. Or we see them arise and say, well, you'll get better. But watering the flowers and not the weeds is not a process that religion or parenting has gone through very much. It's either the punishment predicament or the let's wait and see kind of thing. But if you do an absolute sadhana with the young soul to get rid of that, shine a light upon that darkness, when it arises, that's the best time to get at it, because otherwise these go back to the samskaric memories and back to the winds of karma, and they act upon each other and to produce more, as Vivekananda said, to pile more gloom on gloom. I think right here he's saying something like that when he does his quote here, strike off their fetters, bonds that bind thee down, of shining gold or darker, baser ore. So he wants you to know that both good and bad are chains that hold. That is, a gold chain will hold you just as surely as an iron chain will hold you. So you have to strike them both off to be free. So this is why morality and ethics based in dualism, or religion based in dualism, is not enough to purify. It has to take sadhana. It has to take a spiritual practice to purify the mind of its hidden impressions. Its hidden impressions. When they come to the surface, like a child was misbehaving or at school or whatever and causes a problem with the neighbors, then it's kind of too late. You should have gotten to that earlier. It would have been better if you had have done that in a previous lifetime with yourself and with your children and with your sangha, with your guru, with your opportunities in religion and spirituality, so that these would never rise up in the first place. That would be, well, the only thing I can think of is Sri Ramakrishna saying, if you give an elephant a bath in the daytime, it just leaves the bath shed and goes and rolls in the mud. So it didn't really do any good to give the elephant its bath. But if you give it its bath at night and put it in the shed right away, then it doesn't roll when it's all wet. It doesn't roll in the mud. You bring it out in the morning fresh and clean. What's he talking about there? The art of giving elephant a bath? How many people have a chance to do that anyway, except maybe in a place like India? So it means give the soul its bath here before the darkness of death comes, before this lifetime ends. Put yourself in the shed of mother's feet. Come out in the morning bright and fresh, without any sandbags on your balloon. So this is more than just metaphor and nice sayings to think about. This is an actual practice to follow, a regimen to get with, and make sure that you neutralize these klista vrittis and at least get to the aklistas as an abiding place. Later on, you can get beyond even aklista vrittis, because gold chain, iron chain is a good teaching to take up there. Well, then I've covered these red flags of the six passions and the samskars and the winds of karma. What else is there on the klista side of things? The moorings that bind thee. Strike off these moorings. So Ramprasad Sen sings, "Come, sail with me. Untie the complex mental knots that moor you to the mundane realm. Unfurl the sail of Tara, 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 and ply vigorously the oars of intense spiritual practice if you wish to set sail and cross the stormy ocean of delusion." Beautiful. In Bengali, it's a very beautiful song I could sing you. It's wonderful to know that beings were thinking about music and spiritual life at the same time, rather than just music as a vocation or spiritual life in a cloistered sense. But they were bringing these two together for people to use these wonderful analogies, like a hot air balloon or like a sailboat, and let the mass of humanity on earth know that they can have this. They can return to, if they don't already have, this original mind. That's given to you. That's a part of your divine heritage. It's like I'm an obsessed mind, so I have to stay obsessed just because I'm obsessed at the particular moment, or I just have an ordinary mind. None of these things, or let's put it this way, all of these things are premature proclamations that you have dawned upon yourself. All you really need to do is slough them off, or strike off their fetters, or release your moorings, and think differently. Think in a sattvic way, free of the klista vrittis, and begin to build up a momentum. Like Jesus said, store up your treasures in heaven for a change. Under that category of moorings, of klista vrittis, you can see that the being is laboring under being ignorant at birth. They're attached to the senses. They're bound by desire and obsessed with matter. So that's a surefire way to fall down the sevenfold road of ruination, or some of the concomitants of weakness, which I'll point out to you in a minute. And there you see across the board then what is a more ideal way to undergo your spiritual practice with. These positive thoughts, aklista vrittis. Remember, vritti means a vibration in the mind, which is a thought. And you want to change those, change the quality, or refine the quality of these vibrations in your mind, and keep them steady and balanced day by day, until the mind learns that it is the original mind that's at the foundation of everything. It's the ground of existence, as Meister Eckhart called it once. So you could see there, rather than a bunch of six passions to worry about and a whole bunch of negative moorings, the moorings of the aklista vrittis are much more refined. Unfortunately, and that's why I said you should probably try and transcend the intellectual frame of reference. Why is that? Because beings become proud of their knowledge. As Krishna says in the Gita, knowledge that doesn't lead to truth is dangerous. That's one of my favorite short little Dharma teachings in the Gita. If knowledge doesn't lead to truth, then it becomes dangerous. And we can see that with all of our material inventions and splitting the atom, releasing great power, and that power then gets used for domination over other countries and so forth, and things that would cause karma and samskars to form in the collective mind, and would come back at us in the next lifetime that we lived. In America, probably only 2 or 3 lifetimes are possible at this point as an American, because it's such an infantile country. So proud of knowledge was one problem of the positive thought over the negative thoughts. And also seeking subtle bliss is one of the key teachings of Patanjali in the eight-limb yoga, is that there are four impediments to meditation. And the subtlest of all four of those is this seeking of subtle bliss. That's the ego beginning to find out that it can enjoy itself free of painful thoughts and free of negative repercussions. And so it begins to settle into this, and maybe the highest samadhi it will ever have would be a sananda samadhi, like I'm enjoying the bliss coming from my ego rather than the eternal bliss coming from my Atman. So there are distinctions to make along the way. Seek subtle bliss, bound by good, driven by success. That's where a gold chain becomes a problem. You might say that you didn't cut off all the sandbags yet when you were trying to make that trip around the world in a hot air balloon. And how many days was it in the old movies? So basically you got up in a hot air balloon and you couldn't get all that high because you couldn't see some of these sandbags, and you didn't have a sharp enough knife or a long enough reach to reach down there and cut them. There's why you see there are two sandbags that are out of your range of sight there at the bottom of that carriage that the balloon's hooked to. That's the jiva, by the way. The jiva is the embodied being, and the balloon is its mind. Let's look at the balloon itself, what lower mind is all about. On the right-hand side, it loves pleasure, it suffers worldliness, it is obsessed with the ego, as we were just saying, and its happiness. It's got a narrow perspective, that's more in terms of the intellect. And it's seeking fame. And it's also it's also got a good dose of selfishness in it. You see here. So this is the klistha side of the lower mind. As it begins to transform more away from obsessed mind into ordinary mind, you might say, then it begins to develop a little bit of moral flexibility, begins to seek higher things and seek its way out of darkness. It begins to maintain a sadhana and a practice, however shallow or deep that is, needs to be deepened over time. Clarification of the teachings and intensification of the practice are the two things to watch out for there. It seeks a dharmic family rather than just a worldly family. See across the board, worldliness was impeding the lower mind, but when it begins to rise towards higher mind, it starts to look for people of like mind. And with dharmic family, it'll find a few of those that have peace of mind. You need peace of mind first and foremost, as our Holy Mother said. And then it finds some contentment, and it begins to accrue dharmic wealth. Like I just said, store that up in a deeper place in you, because heaven is actually in the mind. It's not up in the air. So you're beginning to store up these things internally because you're practicing an inner life. Let's look at the four concomitants of higher mind. You can see there meditation on divine reality, contemplating God with form, thoughts of philosophical inquiry, and service of God and mankind. If those seem to be a little bit too much for you to take all in one bite, then you could just look at the first one as meditation, the second one as study, the third one as acquiring wisdom, and the fourth one as karma yoga. Or you could say dhyana yoga, karma yoga, bhakti yoga, and karma yoga are all there. Dhyana yoga meaning, of course, raja yoga or meditation. So the higher mind makes its move towards these four great yogas. It sees them as something to master. And like the story of the two birds in the tree, one higher and one lower, in the Upanishads, the lower bird always looking up to the higher bird, sitting in the sun happy, not eating fruits that are sweet and sour, and getting sick or feeling better in this change off of gunas and dualities. So one day it just flies up there and it sits beside the higher bird and becomes itself again. That's the idea here too. What does Lord Buddha say about this? Fear has he none who has surpassed both good and evil. Fortifying the mind like a citadel, let the wise one fight delusion using the shining sword of wisdom. And there you see a little image of Mother Kali's sword there with the bijam, Om Aim Hring, on it, and the third eye. So beautiful the way Lord Buddha proclaimed that beings should take to this inner practice, this sadhana, this spiritual self-effort, and fortify the mind like a citadel. That's if it wants to move out of obsessed mind, beyond ordinary mind, and into the state of Buddha mind, or original mind. So the only other thing to look at in this chart is the plus and minus signs below, also still divided by left and right, klista and aklista vrittis. On the klista side, negativities, there's what's called the three stupefactions, and then there's what's called the 8 fetters. I talked about those just a few minutes ago. Shame, grief, pride of caste, pride of lineage, and so forth. The 4 deadly traps are there, and the 3 enemies of reason are there. So those are some systems in the Vedanta that are brought out that are to be overcome with the practice. You can find charts on all of those in Footfalls. This chart particularly is on page 519, if you want to look at Footfalls, fashioning a pure and buoyant mind. You'll see one of the versions of that chart in there. So you should look at those charts on the 3 stupefactions, the 8 fetters, which would be in the yoga, under the yoga heading, that is, and then the 4 deadly traps and the 3 enemies of reason. Those are good to look into. So you can make sure that you have cut those sandbags off of the hot air balloon of your mind. On the positive side, there's an attachment more and more to balance, to sattva. That's why contentment and dharmic wealth begins to accrue. One becomes very much content with what one has, as Shankara says in his hymn, Bhaja Govindam. Becomes very much content with what one earns by just the work they do each day, and doesn't go looking for an abundance or getting out of balance. And there you see some other pluses on the side of the positive thoughts. Lower knowledge, we mentioned earlier, is that's called aparavidya. What we're looking at when we look at Dharma and beyond, Atmagyan, is called paravidya, the supreme knowledge. So that has to do specifically with spiritual life and with the relationship between the jiva there, or the jivatman, with Brahman, the Supreme Self, its identity with that, if you would want to refer to the Advaita Vedanta. Then you can see another sandbag falling there from the balloon is a desire for heavenly existence. That also has to be transcended because that's actually your dream state. Heaven, this world is a dream, though true it seem. The only truth is He, the living. That is, Brahman's the only truth in all the worlds. The worlds themselves are just expressions of Brahman. So if you think that way, then heavenly existence will not take you to formless reality, which is why I chanted at the beginning of this class. Yo Brahmanan Vidadati Purvam, Yo Vaivedamsya Prahinohi Tashmai, Tan Hadeva Atmabuddhi Prakasha. You have to get to this Atman and this intelligence that takes you there, the Buddhi. And that will show you the inferiority of all states, like heavenly states. And you want to get closer and closer to the refuge of Brahman, or God, if you want to use that word, and become one with it, immerse yourself in it. Actually live that saying, I and my Father are one. I and my Father are one, its equivalent in Sanskrit is Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman. So in both religions and in any good religion, you'll have this idea, if not truism or an axiom, that there's no real separation between the soul and God at all. That's all a false superimposition placed there by a mind. That false superimposition is thicker and more difficult to navigate or remove if the mind's obsessed with matter. And it's very difficult to move out of ordinary mind towards being established in oneness with Brahman, because it's also attached to matter and mundane things like intellectual pursuits and so forth. That's where Paravidya here, lower knowledge, and heavenly existence just above it go together. And then we've mentioned already the sense of the subtle ego. And that would be the ahamkara that's still attached to the body. It's still wedged or lodged inside of the physical body. And it's, as we said above, it's still attached to the five senses and the pleasures through desire that it gets for that. Be a good time to go to the road to rumination to see how that works on the klista side of things. But let's see, we can do that because we have actually finished this chart. It's a good one to put up here in terms of both, or you might say all three kinds of mind. That is the mind that's obsessed, the mind that's ordinary, and the mind that's original. So you could see this, cutting off these sandbags, this mind is going to go high and deep and far and afford the best view of both God with form and God beyond form. So because of Sri Ramakrishna, we have this chart and his beautiful saying about it. So that's why sometimes we sing to him when we take one of his teachings like this. Jaya Shri Ramakrishna Bhagavan Karunamaya Jaya Kripa Nidana. 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 Om Ramakrishna. Whoever sings thy glories with devotion attains to the four fruits of life. And whoever performs meditation upon thee gets their suffering removed by Ma Sharada. Whoever hears this hymn, Ramakrishna Chalisa, the Lord himself destroys their miseries. O great Master, bestow thy grace upon us. Remove all shortcomings, attachments, jealousies, and false perceptions. And that's a hymn, a few verses out of that hymn of 40 verses called the Ramakrishna Charisa that we like to sing to honor Sri Ramakrishna. And a simple mention of his like that cut the sandbags off of the hot air balloon of the mind and let it soar into the higher levels of consciousness, back to the original mind, which is your own true nature, what we like to call Atman in Vedanta. It might be good to look at the weakness and its concomitants next, because it shows us on two sides of the chart again the two pathways called strength and weakness. Vivekananda says in his own words, the pleasure of the self is what the world calls religion. But the more our bliss is within, the more spiritual we are. Let us not depend on the world for pleasure. So a very simple but straightforward truth there, that Vivekananda warns us away from that mind, both obsessed and ordinary, that keeps leaning towards desire for objects so that I can have pleasure out of them, which also brings me pain, though I don't always know it, called karma, and then returns me into this loop of klista and aklista, good thoughts, bad thoughts, feeling good, feeling worse. Sattva's going back to tamas, light and darkness, good and bad, virtue and virtue and vice, pleasure and pain, and all the other deluding pairs of opposites, dvandva mohena, as Krishna says in the Gita. So both Sri Ramakrishna and Swamiji here, you see, are giving us good quotes and good teachings about how to return the mind to its original state. If you look down the chart then, and it's very well outlined, let's take the path of weakness first. The severed connection between mind and energy occurs. So one can't get this prana flowing. Hard to get up in the morning. Hard to develop a positive attitude about work when you're in a tamasic level of mind, when this darkness has come over you, or this depression. Sandbag, sharp knife of discrimination, I am the self, aklista time. See, so when these thoughts occur to you, there's your opportunity to immediately use that sharp knife of discrimination between what is real and what is not real. So bring back that connection between your energy and the mind. See, it all begins with the mind, and then it starts looking less and less like the original mind, doesn't it? Next thing is when the life force moves unevenly through the nerves and the nadis, then there's this erratic problem. Disease happens for one thing. That's probably going to be listed here in a minute. But the father of yoga has said then basically you can't be at peace. You don't know where to put your arms or your legs. It's called anga me jayatva. You don't have any control over your body. It's always giving you problems. And then shasha prashvashaha, there's another problem of breathing, that you can't have a balanced in-breath, held breath, and out-breath, and keep your breath balanced so that your prana won't spike and valley all the time throughout your daily life. So you want to make sure that that evenness is there all the time, because actions done in restlessness produce more restlessness. And actions done in tamas, that is lethargy, produce the same. So you want to do all your actions in sattva, balance, so the sattvic will return to you every day. It won't be such a difficult task for you to keep balance. So I've already commented on that. That's what's next. Lethargy of the body, dullness of the senses. That's all coming from where? That I didn't keep my mind connected to my life force, and let the body become dull and the senses become either overloaded with gluttony or unfulfilled by darkness. Like you can eat and eat and eat and not be satiated, or you can eat and eat and eat and be satiated but not be satisfied and not be healthy. So it's all a matter of balance, of course, with everything. Then loss of interest in physical fitness and exercise. Of course, that's going to be immediately upon the person. And weightiness of both mind and body happen with that. Overweight of both the physical organ and the physical body happen with that kind of loss of interest in keeping this blood flowing, keeping this prana flowing, keeping the breath flowing, keeping the mind in study, and keeping the mind meditating. You've got to have energy for all of that. Then the breakdown of natural immune systems begins to happen. That's what we're seeing now with people running to doctors, medicines, surgery, and various things. A lot of the great souls I met, they never did any of that. I look at their lives and they kept themselves healthy just with the mind and the life force. So never saw any of that happening to them in an untoward way, because they always had this sattvic balance going on. So the immune systems maintained themselves by the mind's positivity. So back to the hot air balloon, if you have a klista vrittis at least, usually that keeps the illness at bay. You don't have to put yourself under the scalpel all the time for any little problem that comes up, or run for some sort of antibiotic or some sort of pill from the medical profession, which is making money on a lot of those things. And when you can just keep your life force healthy and flowing, keep your mind meditating, study of scripture to have the right intellectual attitude, and the attitude of service to all beings. Those are those 4 yogas again. Meld them into a lifestyle. See, that's a yogic lifestyle you're talking about. I know holistic healers, a few of them. They say, yes, that's good, holistic healing. I like that. I like to help people, but I don't need that help. I have a yogic lifestyle. I know of 2 holistic healers who told me that. Holism is for something, to practice when you're not whole. But if you're already whole, then you don't need that. And why are you always whole already? Because you keep a mental attitude of yoga, balance in you. And you're not obsessed with things that are negative, neither thoughts, nor practices, nor body. You keep everything in balance. That's the true holism of it all, is it has to include life force, breath, mind, thinking, and meditating, not thinking. Those things are all left out of the usual formula of holism today. It's all about the body. Got a call yesterday from a Jehovah's Witness just out of nowhere. I say, hello. Is there someone there I can talk to? I said, about scripture? I said, well, sure, I know something about scripture. And so we started talking, and it, of course, didn't go very far because that philosophy has got a lot of holes in it. I began to point out some of those holes in a nice way, and they were trying to tell me about sin and damnation. They're trying to tell me about resurrection. They're trying to tell me about a perfect life on earth, which is Jesus' next plan, is that we're all going to live in bodies on earth forever. He'll come back this time and everyone will live forever on earth. I said, what happened to heaven? You see? He said, oh no, that wasn't in their philosophy anymore. I said, well, but heaven exists inside. The body can't last more than 90 or 100 years here. Your great-grandfather and grandmother are past. How are you going to bring them back to earth when they're already gone? So, this person started getting a little flustered because he wasn't talking to an ordinary person who could have the wool pulled over their eyes philosophically. So this is what I mean. People have this very skewed philosophical perspective in life. They've been told a bunch of lies in the name of religion. And that's called in yoga Bhranti Darshana, deluded seeing. Bhranti is delusion, Darshana is to see clearly. So their clear seeing got diluted by these other opinions and by these inferior methods and regimens and thoughts. So one has to have health of body, breath, mind, intellect, and philosophy, and meditation. Formlessness has to be also placed in the picture. Sri Ramakrishna said, there are two kinds of great souls. One concentrates on formlessness, and the other concentrates on form. The one that concentrates on form is trying to help you remove your suffering by giving you knowledge. And so, both form and formlessness then are on the minds of these great souls. And if you're ready for formlessness, then you go to that other Paramahamsa who will tell you how to meditate and go beyond name and form, and go beyond time and space, and go beyond karma, go beyond all this, klista and aklista, and reach the highest goal, gatam, gatam, paragatam, as Buddha said. Go beyond all other goals and get to the supreme goal, the paragatam. So there's always that in the mind of both of these kinds of Paramahamsas. I diverged a little bit away from this, but we've been seeing that connection of life force to mind, then life force begins to get uneven, then the body gets and senses get lethargic, then the loss of discrimination around proper food happens. So they begin to eat. Oh, let's see, let's just pick something out. How about fast food? All right, they began to eat just fast food only. They began to supersize themselves, as they say in the old days. You know, it's probably all outmoded now, but they start eating things that are not sattvic. So what happened to your vow of trying to maintain sattva and get away from rajas and tamas? So you try to remain sattva, but what you're putting in your body is not sattvic. What to speak of what you're putting in your mind? If you're putting in a philosophy that's skewed into your mind, that's a fast food philosophical diet. So that's not going to help you at all. It's going to make it worse. So you have to find a great teacher, a great soul, and learn the truth. And it comes all the way down to the body. We're talking about a fall from grace here, you see, if you want to put it in those terms. The immune system breaks down, you know, and because of lack of interest in physical fitness, because of this loss of discrimination around prasad. Everything has to be pure when you take it in. And then balance the in-breath, suspended breath, and out-breath, it gets compromised. So you're beginning to pant like a dog after a big fast run, or all day, it's just tongue lolling out. You want to be able to control that breath and bring peace and contentment back. So this gets lost. Therefore, the thinking process becomes easily confused. Unfortunately, that's not the worst of it. Violent acts get perpetrated due to this erratic prana. And I've taught Vedanta in prisons for some 20 years in my past, made visits to certain correctional institutions and worked with several hundred people there who would come to these classes on Vedanta, and found out that that was a common complaint and a common cause for things, is that they lost control of their prana and then they couldn't control their actions. And so they did some violent act, which then put them in that institution. So this is erratic prana. You lose control of yourself. And then mind gets imbalanced and loses conscience and memory. Pretty soon you don't care if you hurt people. It might be one thing if you went to prison because you hurt someone and you really regret it, but we found people there who were denying that they had hurt anyone, even when it was a proven fact. So you begin to lose both conscience and memory of what you did. This goes on to other lifetimes. This is a good time to segue back to things that you did in other lifetimes that are coming back on you now when you find yourself in, say, a correctional institution and wondering why you're there, why God threw you in prison or some silly thing like that. How about what karmas were perpetrated in the previous lifetime, or what lack of control That is, you didn't strive for balance and control to keep yourself protected and fortified by the armor of love and the higher wisdom. That's a bad time there, when your conscience and your memory both desert you. And then not only suffering of others, but you begin to dip into a deeper level of depression, beset by doubt, fear, guilt, and remorse. Both body and brain become subject to multiple diseases, and death and rebirth in ignorance takes place. It's not all over at the end of the life. So you can't say, well, I'm sure glad death is going to take me out of all this, because you take everything with you into another lifetime, as Holy Mother said. You have to pay for use of the body to the last farthing, is how she put that. So you'll take those as impressions in your mind. Remember the hot air balloon and some of these flags and some of these moorings and so forth, and that you were in ignorance around things, and you look back on that chart in Footfalls when you restudy this after the class and look at it seriously. Well, that results in that kind of thing, death and rebirth and ignorance. In the bardos, as the Tibetan Buddhists tell you. So if ever you want to describe to anyone or remind yourself what the path of weakness is like, because I'm basing this off of Swami Vivekananda's saying that the greatest sin is weakness. In the Vedanta, we don't talk about hell and damnation and eternal hellfires and that kind of thing. We talk about the karma that we accrued because we were weak. However, there's a path of strength that people walk, that great souls recommend. As you can see there, the broken link in the mind of this figure on the chart, that's pressure from both sides, not being able to withstand life's dualities. And these karmas that come on you, the winds of karma and some scars that come back on you. But let's look down this path of strength. The soul intuits the need to purify the physical nadis. So you can see how we're starting off from the mind lost connection with the nadis. So it doesn't remember past lifetimes. It pretty soon forgets most things that it does in life. And that's already, the memory is fading because the prana nadi of smriti is beginning to close up. And then no energy can pass through it, so no light can pass through it. This is all happening within the subtle body, not in the physical brain and physical body, but it's going into the subtle body called sukshma sharira. You have to take account of that if you want to look deeper, the causes of things, because you won't find them in the brain, you won't find them in the body. You'll find instinct, you'll find some sort of sign of it there, but you won't find the cause or the solution, except back in the subtle body. It's called the sharira. That's the real mind. This is just brain you're talking about out here in physics and medicine and psychology. We're talking about the subtle body when we talk about this. So here the soul intuits the need to purify the nadis. I feel limited. I remember telling my mother when I was young, I can never get enough air. So when I was a young boy, I was like, I wanted to breathe more and more and deeper, and I couldn't get enough air in. I couldn't get to satisfy. Every once in a while, I'd take a breath, and oh, there it is. I felt really satisfied with that lungful, 2 lungfuls of air. And that would make me feel better, see. So it wasn't a physical malady or anything. It was just this feeling of being restricted by a physical casing, you see. And I wanted to breathe out of it. I wanted to breathe out of it. And so you can do that once you balance yourself and learn the art of meditation, get instructions, and then you can breathe the rarefied air of spiritual intelligence, living intelligence. That begins to satisfy the soul, even if it has to be in the body. So this is where I'm going with this. A person wants to all of a sudden purify these physical nadis so that they don't limit him or her anymore. So it takes the conscious breathing, exercise, and sattvic food to animate the prana. Here in this path of strength, we're pretty much, aren't we, looking at how many of us awoke in our teens and in our 20s when we started hearing Dharma from Vedanta and Buddhism and Sufism and so forth. We began to think there are higher things here in this world to go after. And when we tried to go after them, we felt that we couldn't reach them. So we began using these age-old practices, which led from physical things to pranic things, from pranic things to mental thoughts to intellectual thoughts, and higher to meditation beyond the mind. Well, by this practice, external senses become pure and connect to the inner senses. Just like you have a brain and then you have a mind, then you have outer senses and you also have inner senses, like you're using in dream state tonight. Your outer senses have been turned off, right? So you can't take them inside with you. So consciousness abandons the five senses of seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, and smelling, and it takes on these subtle senses and tanmatras that go with them, the elements. So now it sees inside, hears inside, smells inside, and so forth, and it goes into a dream world that it projects with its mind inside and dreams itself from place to place, comes back here, and then takes the body and goes from place to place in a physical sense. So this will happen to you when you purify the nadis and your inner senses begin to enter into the picture. And you cannot be a materialist alone anymore. So you can't be attached to matter. You're going to have to be attached to life force. From the physical to the metaphysical, you might say. But that's not enough, because psychic prana begins to flow, and it makes thoughts, oh, there's a nice word, buoyant. See, we just looked at the hot air balloon. So psychic prana begins to make its appearance and makes your thoughts rise like a hot air balloon. And for some souls, that becomes the direct route to enlightenment. If they follow that tract, they'll get straight into enlightenment through their higher thoughts, because it will bring back memory of who they are based upon higher things that they have attained that are beyond both klista and aklista. Right about then, guess who makes his or her appearance? The guru appears in life and gives mantra diksha. So basically, oh, you're having these higher dreams, you're having these higher thoughts, you've done these preliminary practices, now take the mantra and use it and know what it means, and know what the bijam om means, and the bijam hrim, and the bijam shring, and the bijam aim. Know what these seed words of power that are in your mantra mean, and recite them with reverence, and envision the mother of all mantras, or the Lord, Father. And then you will have made the best out of what the Guru came to give you. And that's timely. The practitioner discovers the secret of the scriptures after that. Not given to all, but we're trying to make it be given to all. And when they see the precious power in the bijams of the mantra, then they'll also know that that same power exists in slokas. And why I started off chanting about Brahman, that one divine, formless present, out of which came the Trinity, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, at the beginning of a cosmic cycle, the beginning of a Mahayuga. Out of that formlessness came these three great beings. So that's powerful, to think about that. Even to say Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva is powerful. Or even to say or think Brahman is powerful. So you begin to have this connection with the secret of the scriptures. I'll look next month to the seminar I'll give I'm going to call it something like the two great secrets of consciousness. That is non-duality and Divine Mother. Those are the two great secrets of consciousness. We're going to try and show how they're really hiding in plain sight, and we should bring them out and use them. So this will give you a connection to powerful words, slokas, sutras, suras, and so forth. Like I say, this is sometimes a path straight to one lifetime realization or enlightenment for some souls. But going further with that, Shakti power inundates the body-mind mechanism and compels it to move, compels it to act, compels it to think, and compels it to do its highest benefit for all living beings. When Shakti gets a hold of the body-mind mechanism, then you can see an example of that in Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. Meditation matures to reveal the truth of unity. That has been hidden a long time. And you might say even the idea of unity and diversity begins to go away. Like the person I was having that philosophical discussion with yesterday told me, "Don't you believe in the resurrection?" I said, "No, I believe in eternal life. I got the right teaching from Jesus. What do I need resurrection for? I don't want to come back. I want eternal life. Whether I'm here, there, or gone is immaterial. The great teaching of non-duality from Jesus was eternal life. Come with me. You have loaves, you have fishes, you have huts, you have rivers, you have nets, you have occupations, you have wives and children, but you don't have an inner life yet," he told them. So you must get an internal life or eternal life. And that transcends anything that has to do with change, like transformation or resurrection. Find the one eternal moment, dwell in it forever. Start with sattva and hold that sattva, as we've been saying here. So the truth of unity will dawn upon you. You can see how along the way you've been practicing Ana Yoga, Prana Yoga, Guru Yoga, and Sadhana Yoga. And then all of a sudden now you're here at Dhyana Yoga, the yoga of meditation. At that point the soul has open darshan with higher powers and with the Ishtam, that is the chosen ideal. Gods and goddesses revealed themselves to him in multitudes, sings one song to Sri Ramakrishna, talking about the great master. When he went into meditation, gods and goddesses began to reveal themselves to him in multitudes. So he's always having darshan with these internal powers, which were his own powers inside of him, inside of the great soul. Anything dark or untoward or erratic or not supposed to be there then gets destroyed, neutralized, and destruction of all primal karmas then ensues. You might say those are the subtlest of all sandbags, or maybe you've been cutting sandbags, off the hot air balloon, you see, and it's still not quite going as high as you want. So you look down, there's a few rats in there, out they go, you see, and throw everything out of the hot air balloon so it can rise to its highest level. So these little tiny little containers of karma and samskara have to go too, and they find their right timing to do that. The gunas get mastered and transcended. That's what brought creation, preservation, and destruction forward in the first place, was these three gunas of tamas, rajas, and sattva. And the mind gains full illumination and merges into Brahman. And that's, of course, the ultimate goal of all sadhana and the supreme state. It's called nirvikalpa, or satori, or asampragyata, or nirvana. Beautiful names for it in the different traditions. So the paths of weakness and strength have been read out here, side by side. Final quote says, obsessing with matter causes longing for sense objects. Enjoying objects then creates attachment. Brooding constantly upon one's attachments causes the mind to forget its own ability to think and act freely. In this process of self-actuated bondage, parts of the mind and its energy crystallize, and pieces of its memory and intelligence fall into oblivion. The internal weakness that ensues makes it difficult to gather the mind's awareness back and regain that essential concentration necessary for success in all areas of life. This has been cited by the father of yoga and others as kshipta, or scattered mind. It is responsible for the condition of the stunted human mind that is thereby restricted to only two areas, fragmented and dull. So, of course, if you were with us last Sunday, you saw me put up the 5 states of mind that Patanjali put forth. That is kshipta, mudha, vikshipta. Those 3 were a problem. And then ekagra and niruddha are the kinds of minds you want. Either one-pointed or gone, utterly gone, and back again without any problem. Then gone, utterly gone again. In and out, like Sri Ramakrishna came in and out of consciousness of his body and senses. So that's a very powerful quote that sort of summates this whole process and also summates this other process we wanted to look at that I've mentioned twice, that I know you're all just longing to see. It's this 7-fold road to ruination. I want to get back to this original mind. And symbolically enough, that was actually what Vivekananda sang to Sri Ramakrishna when he first saw him in their lifetime recently. Mono chalo nija viketane, mono chalo nija viketane, shamshara videsher O mind, return to your own abode, your eternal home. You are a foreigner in this foreign land. So why do you roam about aimlessly with no real purpose? The 5 senses and the 5 elements, the ordinary mind, all of these are different from you. None of them belong to you. So why have you become senseless in your attachment to others and to the world, and thereby forgotten your own true nature? O mind, set yourself on the path of truth and walk every moment, lighting your way with the lamp of devotion. Secretly and with great effort, keep the riches of your good deeds with you for sustenance and provision. Greed and delusion, the highway robbers on the road of life, rob all travelers of their belongings. With great care, keep the 2 sentries, Sama and Dhamma, inner peace and self-control, to always watch over you. There is a roadside inn known by the name Holy Company. Take refuge there if you are tired and weary. If you are confused about the way home, ask help of the holy ones who live there. If you get frightened along the way, call on the king of the land with all your heart. The king has great power over that path. Even the Lord of death is afraid of him. Ono chalo nija a beautiful song which Swami Vivekananda, at that time called Narendranath, or Lord of Men by his parents, sang to Sri Ramakrishna when they first met in that lifetime that was so auspicious. And thankfully left behind record of that so that we can bask in the light of this great advice. Return to your own abode. So that would be, of course, your original mind. That's your eternal home. That's where your mind prefers to be. And that's where you can have all the benefits of spiritual life, where all your sadhana brings fruit, and where this natural yogic balance is always ready and available for you. Why? Because you're a foreigner in this strange land called obsessed mind and ordinary mind. Why do you roam about aimlessly with no real purpose? The five senses and the five elements are all different from you. None of them belong to you. Why have you become senseless in your attachment to others and forgotten your own true nature? So return to your own abode, your eternal home, is the message here from Ayodhyaнаth Prakarshi, who wrote this beautiful song so that Swami Vivekananda could sing it to the great master, Sri Ramakrishna. Now let's look at this sevenfold road to ruination. The way I've put it forth here is in a positive way, because along every one of these streets, avenues, byways, boulevards, drives, alleys, places, and so forth, there's a quote by a great soul that warns us and cautions us about these very problems. You can see first there from the Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna says, brooding on sense objects, man develops attachment to them. From attachment comes desire. From desire, anger sprouts forth. From anger proceeds delusion. From delusion, confused memory. From confused memory, the ruin of reason. And due to the ruin of reason, he perishes. So this is why I first took you through weakness and its concomitants, to show how some souls are following, particularly in this day and age, in this Kali Yuga, at this time of life, into this path of weakness with all its sufferings, which we would caution them, and also not just caution them, but tell them there's a path to strength that's been exemplified by Swami Vivekananda when he came here to the West. And one of his quotes is on here too. You can see here that over the image of a great city, bustling with traffic and population, I put this map. The main expressway is called the Fear Freeway. Leads to Boulevard, Broadway Boulevard, not Broadway, but Broadway. And off of that is Worry Way, and Attachment Avenue close to there. And Lust Lane goes off to the left, if you don't want to take that one. And don't get on the Overside Overpass, for sure. Or don't go down Stress Street, or take a right and go onto Desire Drive. That's not going to take you anywhere. Be careful of Passion Place and Anger Alley. Also Travesty Terrace and Delusion Detours. Stay off Confusion Court, Ruination Road, and definitely away from Chaos Circle. So playing with words here and alliteration and so forth, and put a map over that to show how this road to ruination that Krishna describes as ancient and long ago as in the Bhagavad Gita is something to be very wary of. Let's read some of the great quotes here to end our 3-class series. We've just been talking about klista and aklista vrittis. That's Lord Patanjali gave us that teaching. He says, mental imbalance threatens yogic equipoise and meditation. Through practice of japa and spiritual exercises, the mind ceases to react and becomes impervious to brooding and depression, along with the unsteady emotional states they cause. So that's right off of Broadway Boulevard. If you see Lord Patanjali there talking to you about how to use japa and spiritual exercise to keep your mind from reacting to the negativities that are going on all the time in this city called the world. Putting Patanjali across from a soul that he admired very much, we have Lord Buddha saying, that one who is overcome by attachment, which creates entanglements in this world, his sorrows dully increase, like bamboo grass in the rainy season. Here in Hawaii, we know that it's true that if you were just to stand there and watch bamboo, you could actually see it grow a little each day. It grows so fast, particularly in the rainy season, it takes over so quickly. So that's how a good analogy for these problems that creep into the mind. Unbeknownst to people. Another beautiful teaching from Sri Ramakrishna says, one cannot completely get rid of passions like lust and anger. So one must direct them towards God. For instance, if desire comes, transform it into yearning for realization of God. In the case of lust, that impulse must be turned into the desire for intercourse with the Atman. With anger, feel angry that all that stands feel angry that all that stands in the way towards realizing God. And sometimes you would say that, feel angry that others have realized God, but you haven't. So what's the matter with me here? To take myself to task. So now we've heard from father of yoga, father of Buddhism, and Sri Ramakrishna, the modern father of India. Now we see Sri Shankara, the father of Advaita Vedanta. Loss of one's memory is caused by the mind's constant acts of misidentifying the self with the non-self. Focus on the self then, and give up all the distractions of worldly talk, crude music, desire-based thoughts, and the like, and affirm your oneness with the Atman. That would be a remaking of all these external habits that the obsessed mind gets into. One thing would be getting over your obsession with intoxicants and learning to breathe, because the oxygen is the greatest of all intoxicants. That'll send you into the highest and purest state. And then your thoughts become pure, and that becomes an even more wonderful intoxicant. Your thoughts can take you to this path of enlightenment, but it all has to be done free of any external intoxicants, which people are going to in this day and age, and falling into paths of weakness because of that, and suffering. So do it the natural way, the traditional way, and the way in which enlightenment has been being gained by illumined souls for time out of mind. Study them and follow the tradition. Keep yourself free of these other external influences. Lord Vashishta says, absence of discriminative wisdom, want of mastery over the senses, and the ability to stem desires and the inability to stem desires and egotism in the mind, these three culminate over time in delusion, which in turn results in mental diseases that settle into the mind, like snow on the ground in winter. Mental delusion results in the performance of negative acts which form karma and give rise to physical diseases. So whether you look at the traditional teachings of Vedanta, or you look at Patanjali's teachings in yoga, or the teachings of the Dharma from Lord Buddhism, or the teachings of the Advaita Vedantists when they're cautioning you to stay on the path, the traditional path and the non-dual path, right on up here to the ancient seer, Lord Vashishtha, they all have their way of describing this fall from level to level, and a lot of them sport similar practices and observances, like the presence of pure food and breathing, run through a lot of them. And you get to the higher traditions, those that are used by more masterful souls like Buddhism and Vedanta and Advaita and so forth, then you'll find out that they figure that's already been accomplished, and now you're really working in this mind, trying to get the ordinary mind to move over, return to your own home, your own abode, into this original mind, and take up a permanent dwelling there. Return to your home. Beautifully said in the song we just shared. So it looks like Sri Krishna will get the last word amongst all these six great souls. Souls of small intellects and fierce deeds, bewildered by fanciful desires and enmeshed in the snare of delusion, fall into a foul hell. These unfortunates get hurled into the wombs of the demonic, the deluded, and reborn again and again, then fall into a condition which is lower still. Many wombs to be born in here in the physical universe, not just human ones. And even among the human ones, there are ones that are a lot less desirable than one would choose if one had the choice. So this is a good way to caution ourselves about the teachings that have been running through the fabric of this three-class series called the obsessed mind, the ordinary mind, and the original mind. So may we all then reach that original mind and dwell in it with peace and joy, balance, yogic equanimity, sthiti pragnasya, steady wisdom, and have that contentedness and peace that leads to that supreme bliss, which all the seers have as their own possession and want to share with us again and again. May that be ours in this very lifetime and free us from all time from bondage and suffering. Om apiyantu mamangani vakpranishchakshu shrotamatra balamindriyani cha sarvani sarvam brahma upanishadam mahabrahma nirakuryam mama brahma nirakarorda nirakara navasva nirakaranam meastu tadatmani nirateya upanishatsu dharmaste mai shantu te mai shantu om shanti 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 hi. May our bodies experience great health. May our life force flow unimpeded. May our mind expand in its capacity to know Brahman. For the Upanishads state that all existence is Brahman. Therefore, may we never deny Brahman, and may Brahman never deny us. May there be no rejection of Brahman ever by us, we who are dedicated to the realization of the ever-pure Atman within us. May all the divine qualities cited in the Upanishads and all the divine religious traditions and scriptures of the world always abide within us. Om, peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us. May peace be unto all. Om, Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om, Tat Sat.